URC. What we talking about? You, the URC, the URC. This is getting quite tiring. Oh, Nelly. Oh, Nelly. So, we're talking URC, the Urukai, the final round. The Urukai. The Vodacom Urukai. In the final round of league action, if that's the right word for it, round robin is always set imperfectly in my mouth, shall we say, when I need to articulate such things. I need to be reminded of why the robin is a part of that. Is it referring to the bird? Is it referring to something better than a bird? Other options. Okay, so the final round of URC action is most certainly upon us. Sorry once again for the delay. I'm trying to figure out my life in conjunction with podcasting, information gathering, and which direction in which to point this thing as well. Because, there's a lot of rugby going on, and how much to cover, how much not to cover, and how to also get a grasp of what still remains a new competition in spite of the fact that it's in its third season and has captured the imagination in a growing manner with each and every passing year. And this third season has continued to fascinate, and also understanding the kind of dynamics of the tournament more, not just on paper and not just, in the mind, but in the body and the soul. But yeah, feeling the rhythm of the URC season as compared to the previous setup of the Southern Hemisphere rugby calendar, going from Super Rugby into the internationals, into the Currie Cup. Everything had its slot, end of season internationals and all the rest of it. So now we've got new stuff to deal with, and it's all beautiful, isn't it? The new international windows as well, allowing for the tours. So Ireland coming down for 2 games and not 3, interestingly. So it'll be very nice of one of the teams to be able to win both matches and become definitive winners of the series, as opposed to sharing the series 1-1, which would be a bitter pill to swallow, to say the least. Other international matches in that window against Wales for the Springboks and against Portugal as well after that, which should be a very, very interesting game indeed. Great to see the Springboks playing Portugal, and it's just the kind of thing that you need to continue to grow the game around the world, is to have more fixtures like that. And these international windows, as they're set up now, are going to allow for those kind of fixtures to slip in, shall we say. Another team that needs to get some matches against big nations, the USA, who will be hosting a World Cup in not too long as well, and the continued efforts of trying to popularize the game in the United States of America must continue, because it's a large market that's full of athletes that could play our game. So there's many reasons to get in there. And so let's get in there. End of the day. Anyway, drifting far away from the matter at hand, and what a matter it is. It's the final round of URC action. Round 18 for a competition that started back in September of 2023. This is the nature of it. Just the 18 matches, but the final round of action is coming at the end of May, the beginning of June rather, while the first rounds took place towards the middle and end of last year. So, keeping your eye on the prize throughout the competition for players and fans alike, it's a new challenge, especially for the players, let's be clear about that, and the coaches, who seem to take all the flack for the teams that they have to choose to play and compete in these various tournaments, including the travel that's involved as well around the world. I mean, the fixtures have already been released for next year's URC, which is great, allowing, fans and teams to know where they need to be when and what's going to be going on. And what you need to hope for as a fan is that you have all of your best players available as much as possible, and that you're able to compete on an ongoing basis, on a week-to-week basis, much like the Hollywood Bet Sharks fans must. Why am I tagging the sponsors in my own fucking podcast here? What the hell is going on? I didn't swear there as well, which I'm still not doing, because I'm a good boy. I'm the son of a preacher man. For the love of God. Quite literally. So, drifted completely off of what I was thinking about there. Anyway, Final round of the URC is upon us, and there's plenty of excitement to be had. That's what matters. So, first match is going down tonight. That's why this podcast should have been released days ago. Matches of consequence as well. Leinster taking on Connacht. Now, the Leinster story, if you haven't been keeping track, has been dabbled with another dose of tragedy, losing their third Champions Cup final on the trot, I believe, against Toulouse this weekend. Another French opposition. Another French opposition. Another piece of French opposition. Another taste of French opposition. French opposition. La Rochelle for the last 2 years, and now Toulouse. Brilliant game, went into extra time. Leinster had the chance to win it off a drop goal. Didn't quite go down that way, and in the end, Dupont and the boys ended up lifting the trophy. All sorts of lyrical being waxed about Antoine Dupont on the back of that Heineken Cup win. The kind of lyrical that wasn't being waxed when he got bumped out of the World Cup by yours truly, so to speak. But we shall see. He's one of the best scrum halves that's ever been seen, that's for sure. But the kind of talk that we're engaging in now, the kid's 26. If he wants to be remembered as possibly the best player of all time, he's probably going to have to lift a World Cup, because a lot of the other people who are contenders for that throne have done just that. And the World Cup is a very difficult thing to lift. It's a team game. 15 players on a team, but at the end of the day, you got to get over the line if you want to be part of the conversations. Regardless of that, he will be considered one of the best players ever to have played the game, surely, once he retires, the way that things are going right now. And adding a gold medal at his home Olympics, wouldn't hurt the reputation. Winning the World Cup on home turf wouldn't have hurt the reputation either. And you'd have to imagine it's unlikely that he'll ever get that chance again, because France have hosted one too many World Cups in between drinks for other nations, shall we say. So, again, let's drift back to the matter at hand here. The final round of URC action is coming up this evening and tomorrow. Leinster taking on Connacht, and not Connacht, as I was told, which is unfortunate. Much more fun to say Connacht. It was a dark and dim night in Connacht, and the rain was pelting down. But Connacht, if you must. And 100% guarantee Leinster are going to win that match. Let's be clear about that. Connacht a good team, but Leinster smarting after the defeat in the final of the Champions Cup, the Investec Champions Cup. Let's tag all the sponsors, like they're paying me. So, losing in that Champions Cup final now, their focus, even if they'd won in the Champions Cup final, would have been turning back to the URC, which they're yet to win, by the way. Let's keep that in mind. It's side that has dominated the league table and dominated the Pro 14 competition before it changed into the URC, a side that has been dominant on the European stage for many a long year now, and feeds the Irish team, which has been close to dominant on the international stage for a very long time. Or dominant, in between the times that matter. So, they will be desperate and eager to get a victory in that game to make sure that they finish as high as possible in the top four. The top four, which they are in right now, a top four made up of Munster, who are in first position with 63 points. The Bulls, who are in second position with 61 points. Leinster sitting on 60 points in third position, and the Glasgow Warriors also on 60 points. They're in fourth. Each one of those top four teams has won 12 matches. And that matters because if the sides were to finish level on points, the first differentiator would be the amount of wins that you've got in the competition. Assuming they all win their matches, which they almost certainly will, especially the ones that matter, well, listen, we'll go through that shortly. Glasgow Warriors are below Leinster right now because they have 154 points difference, while Leinster have 178 points difference. So that's the second differentiator, which will be what will separate these sides should they finish level on points come the final reckoning, which is after the matches on Saturday, of course. Now, the Bulls have 194 points difference, and that's just under 20 ahead of Leinster, 16 points between them to be exact. Why does that matter? Because the Bulls are heading down to play the Sharks in a massive local derby. The Sharks have been disappointing this season, but everybody saw them in the Challenge Cup final, which they won gloriously, with Ian Etzebeth captaining the side in the absence of Lucanio Am. What a day it was. Yamasuku stepping up to the plate again. Tongues wagging about the number 10, by the way. But there are tongues wagging about a number of number 10s. Let's remember that. And there's a line. There's a line to consider I was having this discussion just the other day. Andre Pollard's still around. Do you think he wants to play in another World Cup? Yes or no? I would say yes. Manie Libbok, he played at this World Cup just gone by. He'll be thinking, listen, I'm the man. I'm ready to step up to the plate. I'm next in line. He'll be there. Another person to think of, Sasha Feinberg and Gomez Zulu. On the rise, number of injuries this season. Tongues have been wagging for a while about the guy. So he could be in line as well. Damian Willemse, I presume at this point, is no longer considered a fly-half and is going to be playing in the centres or at fullback, which is probably for the best because it makes space for some of the names already mentioned. Now, Sia Masuku has BMT, big match temperament. And he stepped up to the plate every single time he's been called upon by the Sharks. But it's been a short period of time now. He's playing very well to the Cheetahs as well, and he's been fighting for his entire career to get back to this nation, by the way. Had to go to Russia to play some rugby. Was not being given the chances. I didn't see his game up until that point, so I'm always hesitant to say, he should have been given the chances. Maybe he wasn't playing well then. I don't know. You got to put your hands up to that. So, Sia Masuku, he's back now, and he's banging, and he should have an opportunity of, being had a look at by Russie and the peeps up there. No, that's all you can say, because it's a side that's won back-to-back World Cups. So to give them any advice would be just absolutely foolhardy. So it's going to be interesting to see the way it shakes out. What are they looking for from their fly-off? Is Sia Masuku not more of a fly-off in the mold of Andre Pollard than Manie Libbok is? Would it be beneficial to have two fly-offs available to them that could offer them two different types of game, and maybe Sia Masuku plays in between those two types of game more so than Andre does, doesn't really engage in carrying the ball to the line in a deceptive manner so much as Manie does. That's Andre Pollard, but he obviously does engage in winning high-level rugby matches, test match rugby, and he's been doing it since he was a teenager, by the way, as well, getting called up to the SA under-20s, pulling off all sorts of heroics. Played around the world as well. I don't need to be polishing Andre Pollard's record here. He's definitely number one in line. So, what's going to happen to Masuku? We shall see. Again, drifting far from the point here. The point being the Bulls are playing the Sharks in Durban. Now, if the Bulls fail to get a bonus point out of that match, if they get 4 points instead of 5, if they fail to score those 4 tries, if the Sharks show up and put up a fight, lose the match, but the Bulls still win without the bonus point, they will finish on 65 points, meaning that Leinster, should they get that bonus point in tonight's game, Friday night that being, then Leinster will also finish on 65 points, at which point it'll come down to points differential. Now, if that situation has happened, it will be obviously the Bulls will not have scored that many points in order to have not scored the 4-try bonus point, and it gives Leinster the chance to usurp them by improving their points differential to the point that they would finish in second place, pushing the Bulls down to third. Meanwhile, the Glasgow Warriors, they're in a bit more of a tough position. They are also on 60 points, just like Leinster, but their points difference being 154 to the 194 of the Vodacom Bulls. They'd have to make up that 40-point differential between the Bulls, also assuming the Bulls win that match. For this situation to play out, the Bulls would have to win that match, and it's unlikely. Even though they do have quite a favorable match to the Glasgow Warriors, they're playing Zebre at home, and a dynamic which does somewhat favour the Scottish sides in the push for the top 8 spots, the race to the 8, as they insist we call it. And for good reason. It is a race to the 8. Right now we're talking about the race to the 4. Glasgow Warriors against Zebre. Now the Scottish sides, having those Italian sides in their pool means that they play 2 matches against both Italian sides. Benetton have been fantastic this year, putting up an almighty fight, and they've put in some great results. So it's been different this year. But Zebre have been the flogging boys somewhat of the competition, finishing bottom of the log, 15 points to their name. Dragons have got 16 points to their name, just above them. Zebre have won 1 match and drawn 1 match. So that says a lot, doesn't it? That means for the Scottish sides, they almost have 2 bankers right there against Zebre, home and away. Bonus point wins, and that puts 10 points on the board already for you, essentially. So you're starting off in a bit of an advantageous position as compared to the rest of the league, who get to play that side once. But Benetton have been quality this year, so they've upset that dynamic once more. So the Irish Conference, the SA Conference, and the Scottish and Italian Conference, and the Welsh Conference as well. Different challenges for each of the teams in those, and the Welsh teams have been suffering this season. To be clear, Ospreys in 11th position right now on 45 points. It's going to take a miracle for them to make it into the top 8. to say the very least. I don't even think it's possible at this point, is it? Surely not. The teams playing each other. I checked that just before, but the amount of permutations are blowing my mind, to be honest. So, focusing on the ones that really, really matter. Turning our attention back to the top. This galaxy brain style that I'm employing here in this podcast. So, as it stands, Munster 1, Bulls 2, Leinster 3, Warriors 4. Warriors will probably stay in 4. Leinster will be ambitious of climbing up those positions should the Bulls fail to secure a bonus point, while Munster on 63 points, they just need to put it in the bank, don't they? And they'll be playing a challenging side on Saturday evening, the second to final game of the evening, kicking off 15 minutes before Cardiff against Ospreys. It will be Munster against Ulster in Limerick. Now, Munster, you have to imagine, are going to be winning that match and putting the bonus point on the board as well against local opposition Ulster, who did manage to upend Leinster last week in dramatic fashion, allowing for the Bulls to climb into that second position and really giving them the massive advantage of potentially hosting their home semi-final. They are going to be hosting their home quarter-final already. That much is guaranteed. It's just a question of whether they will, should they progress from there, be the hosts of the home semi. And, of course, it matters on who wins all of those knockout matches, because in the past we've made predictions, we, meaning me, have made predictions that have truly not proven to be true come the knockout stages of the URC, when the entire approach to the competition changes for all of these sides. And in the do-or-die matches, when you have all of your players available and you can come and really spring a surprise on a side, much like the Bulls did in the URC Season 1 when they travelled to the almighty Leinster and knocked them over away from home before coming down to lose to the Stormers in that dramatic final when the Stormers lifted the first ever URC trophy. And who won the trophy last year? It was the mighty Munster, who nobody really gave a chance to, travelling down to Cape Town, upending the odds to make it all the way, travelling away at all times in the knockout stages, coming to Cape Town and knocking over the reigning champions at the DHL Stadium in inclement weather in a match where the Stormers really never adapted to their conditions, and they got sprung by a really impressive Munster side who have backed up that performance by finishing, well, not finishing, but potentially finishing top of the log in this year's league competition. Now, if Munster manage to finish top of the log and they have home ground advantage all the way to the final, they'll say, well, nobody can beat us at home, can they? But, they would do well to remember the lesson of the side that they beat away from home just last season. So, looking away from the top four, which, to be clear, after everything that has been said by one and all, including me, should stay exactly the way it is. Everybody should win there with a bonus point, and then the log will remain as it is now, unless the Glasgow Warriors chase down that 24-point difference between them and Leinster. It's 24 points, yes. Between them and Leinster, which is also unlikely. So, counting on the top four to bank their positions and go into the playoff stages as they are. Munster number 1, Bulls number 2, hosting their home quarterfinals and semis. Munster potentially hosting the final. Leinster and Glasgow Warriors guaranteed to host the quarterfinal, and thereafter we'll find out who beats who in the zoo. Now, outside of the top four, first side that shows up, the DHL Stormers. Here's another sponsor. Not my sponsor. Somebody's sponsor. So the Stormers are in 5th position. They're in 54 points, too many points away from the top four to climb, and the Glasgow Warriors can be safe in the knowledge they'll be hosting a home quarterfinal. Difficult to look back on individual matches and say, well, if they'd won that one, then they would have been in the quarterfinal position, because you could look all the way back through, as I've said, the season that starts in August-September situation over there, and there's many matches along the way that were won and lost on fine margins, including a match against the Lions, for the Stormers, by the way, which they narrowly won early in the season with Feinberg and Gomezulu. I think he scored 16 points of his own in that match. Scored a spectacular try, popping it up off the knee, which caught me by surprise. Unfortunately, I was commentating on that match, and oh my gosh, couldn't believe my eyes. Wish I'd been better in that moment, most importantly. And there's always room to improve, Paul, huh? Always room for improvement. All right, so the Stormers sitting in 5th position on 54 points. They're 1 point ahead of Ulster. Ulster, as previously mentioned, will be playing a Leinster. Highly likely they only managed to get maybe a point, maybe two, out of that match. So the Stormers would do well to, obviously secure a win and a bonus point. And by the way, they'll be playing against the Lions, who also have a sponsor, who I intentionally failed to mention. So the Lions are in 9th position right now. So this is really the one that fascinates on the South African front. The Stormers playing the Lions in 9th, one place out of the top 8, the playoff positions, in other words. And the Stormers secure on 54 points in 5th position because of the way that the other results and the other fixtures are going to go, the teams that are going to be playing each other. The Stormers are guaranteed to be in the playoffs. It's just a question of which position they're going to finish in. And you get to that tricky part of choosing your opposition, for the quarterfinals, knowing who's going to finish where, and judging which game you can win or lose on the basis of that. Dangerous thinking. Let's be clear about that. Now, that being said, who wants to play Leinster right now? On the back of that Champions Cup loss, hurting. Tears flowing from their eyes. And heading back to home turf, the RDS, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a tough assignment. But every single match is going to be a tough assignment in the quarterfinals. Munster at home. Who fancies that? Leinster at home. Who wants it? The Bulls at Loftus Versfeld. Come and get it. And then the Glasgow Warriors as well, at home. Glasgow have been tremendous. They've been on the slide, though, lately. So maybe the Glasgow Warriors, the reason they are finishing in 4th, is because they are the 4th best of those top teams. The league table doesn't lie. So it would be beneficial to play Glasgow away from home, although that slide that they've been on has been on a South African tour. And although they lost both matches, they secured a crucial bonus point right at the death. 2 bonus points against the Bulls in that match they played in Pretoria. While they couldn't back that one up against the Lions, I believe that it was. So, finishing on 60 points, and then the final round coming. If the Stormers manage to win their match with a bonus point, obviously they can't be caught by Ulster. They'll finish in 5th. That'll mean that they'll play the Glasgow Warriors in the first knockout round. If they manage to lose to the Lions, and then the other results work out in the ways that they shall, the Stormers could find themselves slipping not out of the playoff spots, but might find themselves in a less advantageous position, shall we say. Because the other matches, of course, depending on where they finish, will be lining up against potentially tougher teams. Now, the Lions, they'll be wanting to win with a bonus point, desperate indeed to win with a bonus point, as they are chasing down Benetton, Edinburgh, and Ulster, as well as the Stormers for that position. But the Stormers and another one of those sides already secured. But there is a chance for the Lions to make it into the playoffs now. They are playing away at the DHL Stadium. They have beaten the Stormers before in this competition, pulled a fast one on them, sprung a surprise. Was it in URC too? And I think it was down in Cape Town even as well. The last game that the Stormers lost against South African opposition for a very long time, until the Bulls beat them at Loftus Versfeld this year in that match where they packed the stadium out. Tremendous occasion that was. So the fixtures coming up for round 18, Leinster Connacht, Glasgow Warriors against Zebre at home, both going down on Friday. The Warriors expected to pick up an easy 5 there. Leinster against Connacht. Leinster expected to pick up a 5, but not as easy, that's to be sure. The Stormers kick off the action on Saturday at 1:45 South African time when they're playing against the Lions in what is going to be a proverbial rip snorter, a humdinger. So, can the Lions come to the party? Can they do their season justice and win a really difficult match for them against the Stormers? A match which, if they did win, would mean that all 4 of the South African franchises would be in the Investec Champions Cup next year, and that would be a tremendous achievement. 4 South African sides who have an impact in the Champions Cup, that's going to be interesting to see what it's going to take, because climbing to the top of the Challenge Cup, totally different kettle of fish to the Champions Cup. The Challenge Cup being made up of the sides that really suffered in the previous season of all of their competitions, and, as such, not being as high level of competition. And the amount of focus as well that the sides from Europe put on the Champions Cup, especially as you get closer to those knockout stages, after the somewhat archaic group stage, when you play against a certain selection of sides and the results are measured against other sides, and then you have a log table that's created not out of necessarily sides that you've played against, but a collection of other sides that are in your group, and then you decide on who plays the home and away fixtures on the basis of that, at which point, as a team, you can start saying to yourself, what's more valuable to us as a squad, as much as the Vodacom Bulls had to do in the Champions Cup, when they won their quarterfinal, was it round of 16? Anyway, they won their match, and then they had to make travel arrangements on the spot, essentially. Well, it's not exactly on the spot. You know there's a possibility of you going, but the tickets could not be booked prior to that. Now, you'd have to imagine that as a team, a squad, a franchise, before that game, you said to yourselves, as management at least, listen, if we win this match, then what's going on, boys? We're sending the boys overseas. And it turns out the answer to that question was a solid no. So the Bulls had the next weekend in the URC after the Northampton match, it would have been. So they won their knockout match. They went to play in Northampton overseas. They had to book 3 planes, all the crazy stuff. Courtney Laws talked his stuff. The players went overseas. It wasn't the best selection of Bulls side, but it was a very strong team. And what I was seeing from that is that we are progressing as South African sides into building the kind of squads that are needed to compete on all levels. And it really means harvesting a lot of serious talent. And that's why a lot of South African players are being called home also. Financially, it's making sense enough for the South African players to play at home, for players like Eben Etzebeth to forego the contracts that he would get in places like France and England and, well, maybe not England right now, to be honest, as well, due to the vagaries of, the winds of change in international rugby. Saw Johnny May complaining that the South African sides have too much financial clout. What world are we living in? Let me check the exchange rate again here. How much are these English clubs? Anyway, all right, so we shall see what the future shall hold. All right, let's get back to the fixtures and away from the controversy. Benetton playing Edinburgh. Now, that's a king-size fixture right there. Benetton in 8th position on 49 points. Edinburgh in 7th position on 49 points. So the Lions, they'll be sitting back and watching that one, essentially. Although, of course, it's taking place on the same day as them, kicking off 15 minutes after their match against the Stormers kicks off. Either way it works out, one of those sides cannot get the full complement of points, giving the Lions that opening to get in to the top 8 should they beat the Stormers in what will be, make no bones about it, a very, very difficult fixture for the Lions to win. And the Stormers will be eager to secure that 5th position. But for the good of the nation, wouldn't hurt if they could fit in a loss there and the Lions could qualify for the Champions Cup. What would it mean for them qualifying for the Champions Cup? Oh, well, that's another question altogether. Financially, I assume a lot. Professionally, they're not winning that competition. Bottom line, brass tacks, end of the day, that's not a competition for them to win. Challenge Cup, maybe. But, money talks. So, and the Lions do need the cash to hold on to these players, which they continually leak. Well, as they've been building this youthful side, the Lions, it's always been a fear of mine that it's only a youthful side if you are going to be able to hold on to these players that you are building this youth revolution on. And it has not proven to be the case that they can hold on to them. So Jordan Hendrickse leaving at the end of the season, as is Emmanuel Chituka, Manu, to join his brother Vincent at the Sharks. Both players going to the Sharks. Not going overseas not going to Japan or to a side that you won't be playing against. Going to a local side that you'll be playing against twice in your own conference. So in order for the Lions to rise, they must rise above the South African sides that they play against in the South African Shields, because you play those sides twice while you play all the other sides in the competition once, whether it be home or away, over the course of a 2-year period. So the way that the Lions are tactically approaching the long term to this competition, reality bites. Okay, so we'll see what happens next week, because the Sharks are stacking up some decent talent. Although it was said that you can't buy a rugby team, Trevor Nyakane and Andre Esterhuizen are incoming, as is Emmanuel Chituka, as is Jordan Hendrickse. 2 of those players are World Cup winning Springboks. Is Esterhuizen a World Cup winning Springbok? Not sure he was in the squad for... Anyway, you get the point. Big time players are coming in. Manu Chituka, not a Springbok. Jordan Hendrickse, potential Springbok of the future. Blitzbok as well. So, the Sharks will have an even better team next year, theoretically, but they already bought all the Springboks, in the world, so to speak. They've got a lot of Springboks in their squad, and in spite of that, that hasn't translated into a good URC season, and that's because international players have restrictions on how many games they can play for their franchise sides, and they won't be available for all of the matches. due to Springbok protocols here in South Africa and other protocols elsewhere. It's Leinster, the same situation. That's why they have such a potent, expanded squad to make sure that they can compete even when those top players aren't playing, even when you're resting them for the Champions Cup match, as Leinster did, by the way. So after all the consternation about Jake White sending a B team for the Champions Cup match, then Leinster sent a B team, as they always do, to come and tour South Africa's C team, potentially, some were saying. But, of course, it's the reverence of the Champions Cup that people were concerned about there. It's like, this is a top competition and you're disrespecting it by not sending your best. And I don't know what that says about the URC, is what I'm saying. So you got to pick your battles, and Leinster surely also thought that if they could get a couple of bonus points, maybe a result in South Africa, they could retain top spot, and they almost would have as well. Was it not for a loss that they actually suffered at home? Well, not at home, in Ireland, rather, when they lost to Ulster last weekend. And that one really, really put a dent in their competition, to be honest. Now, first place, seemingly off the table, and they could finish in third. Could be travelling for the semis and the final, for all they know. Could be doing that. It's frightening, sir. So, back to the fixture list. Stormers Lions 1:45, Benetton Edinburgh 2 p.m. as we spoke about all these times, South African kickoff times. Scarlets against the Dragons, that's kicking off at 4. That's going to be a dead rubber match between two Welsh sides who continue to suffer. The Welsh will be playing against the Springboks at Twickenham to kick off the international season on the 22nd of June, and they're going to have to pull themselves towards themselves, because it's a dark time in Welsh rugby right now. Similarly so in Australian rugby. They just shut down the Western Force. It really sucks, because to have a strong Australia is absolutely pivotal. I remember the days of Tri-Nations, which one of the greatest rugby tournaments ever to have existed, when it was just the 3 nations going head-to-head, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and every single match was a match of intense consequence. And there were no gimmies. And at that point, South Africa were not in their best shape from time to time during the course of the Tri-Nations competition. And we would be the side suffering and trying to make it happen. Now, of course, tables have turned drastically in Australia. They're experiencing some serious slippage. And the World Cup performance indicative of just that. But perhaps an overblown example of it, because, they engaged in some madness on the way into that competition, and it proved out to be ineffective, to say the very least. Back to the fixtures. The Sharks are taking on the Bulls at 4:10. Now, the Sharks returning from that Challenge Cup victory. Turns out Ebenezer not going to be playing in this game. Just another example of those big players missing games, but I assume that this is possibly injury related. But you haven't seen a lot of Ebenezer since he came. Saw a lot of him this season as compared to the previous season. Had some injuries he was dealing with as well, also the Springbok protocols. And you see that he steps up in the big moments, don't you? The way that he played in the final of that European competition and the semi-final all the way in. He's a proper leader, proper champion. Double World Cup champion. He's done it all in the game. So, there is a good chance that you're not going to see the best version of the Sharks at home this Saturday. There's a good chance of that. That being said, they still have tons of quality in their ranks, and they've been playing a better brand of rugby. If they can spring a surprise on the Bulls, they'd really disrupt their top 4 finishing ambitions and might see the Bulls slide down to 4th, almost certainly. In fact, you can bet your house on it that you'd see the Bulls sliding down to 4th. They cannot be knocked out of the top 4, so they'll be hosting a quarterfinal regardless. So the Sharks, who are in 13th position, having won 4 out of their 17 matches this season, the Bulls will be hoping that they continue that form, because that's the form the Bulls are trying to see, and that the Sharks just roll over and allow the Bulls to score those 4 tries, win the match by a hefty margin, make sure that Leinster don't have the opportunity to finish on the same points as them and chase down that points differential. And, what will be will be. And then Munster against Ulster. It's kicking off at 6:15 in the evening. That's going to be a massive game, but you got to believe that Munster are going to get the job done to retain top spot and back up a really successful season in the Vodacom URC. There we go. Damn sponsors. Damn sponsors. In the Vodacom, in the URC, and continue that form of theirs in the URC, coming on from last season when they upset the Stormers in the final. Ulster, on the other hand, coming off that victory against Leinster, will be full of confidence and hoping that they can get themselves a win, that the Stormers slip up and they can make up the 1 point difference between them and the Stormers, finish in 5th position and potentially play against the Glasgow Warriors in the quarterfinals instead of probably Leinster. Now, were they to win that match, and I'm not even going to start engaging in the permutations, not even going to start engaging, because if they do beat Munster, obviously other teams will rise above Munster, and it might just turn out that they end up being, then it won't be the team that played Munster then. Might be the Stormers. It all depends, all right? So let's not get into the weeds here. Final match is kicking off at 6:30. That's Cardiff against Ospreys, another Welsh derby, which is nothing on it, unfortunately, for the mighty and proud Welsh, who have had another rough and ready season for the in the URC. No sponsor. In the URC, it's been a tough year for the Welsh sides. Dragons in 15th, 17 matches played, 3-1. Llanelli Scarlets, 14th, 17 matches, 4-1. Cardiff Rugby, 17 matches, 4-1. The Ospreys have won 9 of their 17 matches and may just finish with 10, so they'll be over a 50% record, and that's the best of the Welshmen. So they really need to sort things out next season. Benetton, just a tremendous season for them, and they'll be eager to finish in that top 8. It's going to be absolutely massive match that they're going to be playing in their Shield derby when they're taking on Edinburgh, and they're going to be at home. And, oh, man, it's just massive. 8th against 7th with the potential for the Lions to usurp them. They, of course, will be hoping that the Lions get tamed by the Stormers and remain right there on 49 points. Then everything will be just fine, and whatever happens between the two of them will be inconsequential because they have won 10 matches, and that's why they are ahead of the Lions in 8th position, and the Lions are in 9th. The Lions have won 9 matches, and although they're tied on points on 49 as they are with Edinburgh, and the Lions have that points differential of 133, tremendous stuff. To be clear, the Stormers have a points difference of 115. So the Lions have a better points difference than the Stormers right now in an incredible turn of events because they've been free scoring. When they've been playing well, they've been playing very well. But they do have that challenge of playing in the SA Shield. So the local derbies that they play against the Bulls and the Stormers, there's a no question win situation for the Stormers and the Bulls because they're heading for those top 8 and top 4 spots. And they do tend to get the home and away wins against the Lions. But the Lions have been putting up more and more of a fight over the course of time. The Lions did beat the Stormers once, as mentioned, a year or so ago. But it is really difficult to pick up a full complement of points from the SA Shield. I mean, if the Lions picked up a full complement of points from the SA Shield, that would be a turn-up for the books. To beat the Sharks, the Bulls, and the Stormers home and away. Crazy scenes. Stuff that the Stormers have been doing over the course of their first 2 seasons of the URC and into the third. Their record domestically is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Finding a way to win really close matches all the way along. And on the other hand, the Lions, they've suffered a couple along the way, but they've also been good. The Sharks, on the other hand, the less said the better. I'm going to leave it right there. The Sharks, 13th position, 17 games played, 4 wins, 13 losses. A negative 76 points difference, which is better than the likes of Llanelli Scarlets, whose points difference is negative 279. Good grief. The Dragons, negative 294, and Zebra, negative 286. That's the definition of a rough season right there. As a fan, when you're tuning in and you're seeing those kind of points piled up on a weekend-by-weekend basis, sometimes you got to ask yourself, what's the point? But they'll be back next year. I'm joking about that, of course. There's a big point. It's just a quote from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You got to watch that one again. Now, if I was a more cultured man, I would say, I've got to read that one again. And if I was an even more cultured man, I wouldn't be lying about the again part. All right, so that's the URC, no sponsor. Coming at you this weekend, the final round of action, round 18, before we head into the playoffs. It's all focus on the URC now. No more breaks for anything. No more internationals. No more cup breaks. No more nonsense. No more nothing. We're coming down to the crunch here. The situation makes sense in the URC now. It's always easy to actually focus the attention coming towards this point of the competition, as was first exposed to South African fans in URC Season 1 when the Stormers brought it home with all of those tremendous results happening that meant that the Stormers hosted the final, which Leinster were in line to host before the Bulls beat them in dramatic fashion away from home. And similarly again, next season, all of the permutations were thrown out of the window with a couple of spectacular results, which resulted once again in the final being hosted at the DHL Stadium. So for the first time in history, the final will not be hosted at the DHL Stadium this year. I mean, surely it's not possible. I mean, I'm just trying to think if what I'm saying is true. But, I mean, if Glasgow, Leinster, Bulls, and Munster all lost somewhere along the way, then the Stormers would host the final. Okay? And if you want to say that's possible, you go right ahead. There's many companies waiting for your money. All right, so Vodacom URC wrapping up this weekend. Can't wait to see the playoffs. Can't wait to see this round of action, because this round of action is essentially a playoff round, and it's going to be sensational. All right. Yeah, and that's about that. I don't want to say anything else because there's a threat of it being nonsense. Enjoy your rugby weekend, and I will speak to you soon.